Meanwhile, Annie Apple, the mother of Giants first-round pick Eli Apple, who is also an ESPN and Sports Illustrated contributor, has been writing recently about her personal experiences with domestic violence, being livid with the Giants and her disgust with co-owner John Mara and her belief that the team was leaning heavily on her son in an effort to control his mother. Now, in the wake of her openness, Eli was asked 7 minutes of questions on Thursday exclusively about his mother, her columns, and their relationship rather than anything about this week's matchup with the Philadelphia Eagles. Eli saying this: "It's definitely a weird position, of course. You just want to focus on football and have football be your main focus. And sometimes when things like this come up, it definitely makes it a little bit hard because you're thinking about it just a little bit. But I've just got to move on from it, talk to her a little bit, speak my mind, and move forward. It's like, that's my mom, so I can't really try to come at her at all. She's going to check me big time." Well, Cain now back with us,
yes.
But good to have you. But I want to start with Max here on this subject. Oh, okay. We'll start with Will, actually. We'll go back to the original plan. Always trust your gut, right? Will, should Annie Apple back off?
Yes. Yes, she should. This is always a fun conversation to have because here we go down the path. I get to be accused of supporting domestic violence or telling a domestic violence survivor she shouldn't be speaking. Not the path. This is the situation. Annie Apple has to analyze her place in the situation, okay? If you reduce that into know your place, woman, you're not listening and you're not trying to be smart on this. Annie Apple is a supporting character in the Eli Apple story. She's very much like Aisha Curry in that respect, or P.J. Willett, Danny Willett's brother, or there was a swimmer this summer in the Summer Olympics named Katika Hosu from Hungary, and her husband had the spotlight on him a lot. When you're a supporting player, you have to understand that if you diminish or undercut or take away from the main player, Steph Curry or Eli Apple, you risk not only their career, but the reason people are listening to you in the first place. People want to hear what Annie Apple has to say because Eli Apple is an NFL football player. That's why. And if she does think...
She was a media personality prior to Eli getting drafted, just so you know.
She has a Sports Illustrated column. The reason we're talking about this
today... She was already
today,
working in media. I just want you to be clear on that.
That's fine.
It amplified her platform. Her son's position amplified her platform.
So, by the way, what we're talking about here is she has an inherent conflict of interest, and the conflict is her son's career. So she is doing something, ultimately, that can diminish her own voice. It doesn't mean I don't think her perspective is important. It doesn't mean I don't think her perspective is something we should hear from. But she should understand, and she should personally be able to analyze what she's doing here and potentially how it affects her son. But secondarily, you bring this up, Molly, she had a professional career as a pundit or an analyst before this. Well, she has a responsibility as well. And in this latest column, I think Annie Apple is irresponsible in several ways. Let me just give you a few of those. Number one, I am extremely sympathetic to Annie Apple's past and what she's been through. She has definitely unique perspective on domestic violence. But that does not give Annie Apple special insight or knowledge on why the Giants did what they did. She accused them of acceptance and passivity when it comes to domestic violence. Does she know something we don't know about why John Mara decided to give Josh Brown a one-game suspension? I don't know. I don't know all the analysis that went into it, and I can't leap to the conclusion he doesn't care about domestic violence. That's number one. Number two, she said in her column, he didn't call her. The Giants didn't call her after her column. Well, they don't have a responsibility to call her. She's not the center of this story. She's actually not even a part of this story, and that leads us to number three. She has said the Giants, and she's livid about this, are leaning on Eli to tell her to stop. Eli himself has said that is false. That is not true. Annie Apple has a responsibility to treat this subject with the accuracy that it requires. I want to hear from Annie Apple. We all want to hear from Annie Apple. But she needs to go through this calculus. And when you step into this realm, I expect to be criticized. She should expect to be criticized. And these are very, very fair criticisms.
I want to address that. In the first place, the Giants try to, I'm not saying they always succeed, but they try to draft character. They try to draft character guys, unless there's an obvious talent gap. Where it's close, there was drafts where every single guy they draft was a team captain. Like, that stuff is important to them. And the thing about character guys is oftentimes they come from character parents. In this case, a character mom. A lot of times they come from character moms. And this character mom is feels compelled, whatever, everyone in the media has an ego. I mean, we all want attention for where we don't just wind up in front of a microphone or a camera or in a column. I mean, that doesn't happen accidentally. Your profession chooses you for a reason. But that aside, I'm willing to accept the idea that she feels compelled by her own moral compass to speak out, even if it's inconvenient for her son or someone else. And I would say that in this case, rightly or wrongly, according to your analysis, but in her analysis, she's holding the Giants to their own standards, their purported standards. And my view about the Giants and why it would have been a good idea to reach out to her is rather than run from that, what the Giants might want to do is run toward that and embrace it. And I think that would go away, considering her perspective that you mentioned on this subject, having survived it. That would go away toward them rehabilitating their image, if not their soul in that sense, and would be a good idea.
Stephen A.
I wanted to go last because I didn't want to be interrupted with what I'm about to say. Will, you're wrong. And not only that, I think in this particular instance, you're being a bit insensitive, if not flat out disrespectful. Here's why. You brought up the Ayesha Curry comparison. Ayesha Curry is a wonderful woman, but at the same time, she spoke about trying to get into the arena conspiracy. She talked about racist cops in Cleveland or whatever the case may be because of something that happened with a relative of hers. And then she accused the NBA of being fixed. Those are things that had something to do with the game, to the point where, with all due respect to the wonderful woman she has proven herself to be, it put Steph Curry in a position where he had to sit up there and talk about his wife after losing Game 6 of an NBA Finals, okay? So what I said at the time about Ayesha Curry is something I should have said about Bill Clinton, because whoever's in the spotlight, you got to look out for them because they're the ones in the eye of the storm, not you. In the case of Annie Apple, there's no comparison here. She is on the record saying she is a domestic violence victim. That is a far more serious situation. Number two, she's pointing to John Mara, how he handled the situation, combined with the quotes that he gave, which is why she highlighted in a column talking about he was insensitive, dismissive, and callous, because she pointed to things that he said, his actions, and how we learned in the aftermath of Josh Brown's transgressions, how the Giants were, dare we say, exercising a dereliction of duty in terms of how they conducted themselves in that matter. So if you are Annie Apple and you're commenting about Eli Apple and how he's being used on the field or a coach's decision or something like that, that's far different. To sit up there and to say that a mom shouldn't ingratiate herself into football matters and how her son is being utilized, you would have a point. That's not what she was doing here. She's speaking about an issue that is very relevant and very piercing to thousands, if not millions, of women out there who happen to be victims of domestic violence. This is a woman that has been in news for over 20 years. She used to work at NBC in Philadelphia. She worked at NBC and MSNBC. She was a writer. She was a producer. This is before she got allowed to do some work for ESPN. It was before she was allowed to do some work for SI.com. This is a woman that's on the verge of going to homeless shelters to address and help those women any way they can who have been domestically abused and beyond. She is an active participant in the fight against domestic violence, and an organization who happens to employ her son exercised such a level of insensitivity in terms of how they addressed the Josh Brown situation that they were excoriated not just by me, not just by Max, but pundits and commentators all over the place, because there was no question that the New York Giants could have and should have done a better job in doing so. So to sit up there and to bring bring Annie Apple to the equation and to talk to her about knowing her place and all of this other stuff. What place is there? She's a victim of domestic violence. She's speaking about them as it pertains to domestic violence. She isn't somebody that's talking about Eli Apple on the football field or the Giants on the football field. She's talking about a sensitivity on a part of an organization who was supposed to be first class that exuded anything but when it came to Josh Brown.
If I may, I don't want to interrupt you, Stephen A. I wanted to grant
that go ahead.
You deserve it. I don't want to jump in, but we're running out of time. And I have to say this. It's possible that I'm wrong. It won't be the last time. It isn't the first time. I don't think I'm wrong. But I'm not insensitive. And I'm not being disrespectful to Annie Apple. Disagreeing with someone and questioning their criticism and analysis is not being disrespectful. And if we can learn anything in this entire equation, whether it comes to race or domestic violence, it's the guy that nods at you vacantly and tells you you're right on everything is not the guy that is respecting you. On the merits of this, you said Ayesha Curry forced Steph Curry to sit up there and answer questions. So did Eli Apple. He had to spend 7 minutes specifically talking about his mom. But you also brought up the seriousness of the issue. I completely and utterly respect Annie Apple and what she's been through, but I also know this, Stephen A., it doesn't make her infallible. It doesn't mean everything she ever says is right.
Well, I agree with that.
And she can't be wrong. And on this situation, Eli himself has said she is saying things that are false. The Giants are not leaning on me. What I'm here today saying is this. Just because you've been through something doesn't mean you can't be questioned and doesn't mean you're right on everything. And Annie Apple, in this situation, has gone too far. Well, she said things that are irresponsible.
We have to go to break. But you talked about her responsibility earlier, and I think it's her responsibility to stand up for domestic violence victims as a survivor herself. She can't just sit by and watch.
Even if it's inconvenient for her son.
Even if it makes her son uncomfortable. No, listen. Even though it makes her son uncomfortable, this is for the greater good, and this has to be done. And it is
for the greater good. It is for the greater good. But let's also remember the impetus for it all was how the Giants handled the situation. That was the impetus for her opinions. It's not like she just said something. The Giants exposed themselves for exercising a level of sensitivity in all this.
You mentioned earlier that this was maybe primarily for media attention. I can tell you, I know these two have suffered tragedy. Anybody that's suffered tragedy in your life, something like this, it is so hard to open up emotionally and to put yourself out there and to relive those kind of events. She's doing this purely for the other victims, to be a voice, and as Max mentioned earlier, a moral compass.
Molly, all that can be true, and all of that goes unrebutted from me, but it doesn't absolve you of I'm sorry, let me finish. It doesn't absolve you of the responsibility of treating this conversation, a very important one, with the respect the truth requires.
Of course.
And she had said things in this column and inserted herself into the story in ways that do go beyond simply the cause. Causes cannot run over the truth.
Wait, let me just say, what you seem to be arguing is you simply disagree with her analysis of the situation or her conclusion about the situation, not her right to be saying it or the fact that she is saying it. You disagree with her analysis.
Definitely not her right to be saying it. She definitely has a right to be saying it. Whether or not she's saying in the right place at the right time and saying the right things is certainly up for debate.
And that's what
she doesn't have a right to say that Eli Apple is being stymied from being supportive of her or whatever the case may be. She does, but I get you there. But her position on domestic violence as it pertains to the New York Giants, she has every right to say what she said.
Well, no one is questioning her right.
She's qualified to say it.
No one is questioning her right.
And by the way, just about Eli Apple, the way he's handled it, when I said character mom, character guy, I think he couldn't be more kind of open about it and handling it any better than he is. He's in an awkward position.
And I just don't want victims to be excoriated from speaking out because of the backlash they'll receive. More First Take after the break. Stay here.